Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Religion Unplugged podcast, your one-stop shop for discussions on faith and culture. We are here today with Vanessa Rosa, also known as Gothix. She is a streamer, YouTube personality, and political commentator, and now the subject of a new award-winning documentary called Gothix. She was a goth agnostic, maybe Wiccan, Black woman who ended up getting canceled by her own community and becoming a political freethinker and then a Christian. Your story is really bonkers, and you should really, and inspiring, and you should really check out the documentary on loor.tv for the full story. But for now, we're very happy to speak to the lady herself. Ms. Rosa, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here and chat with you.
Absolutely. So let's start over here from the beginning for our listeners. What would you say you had at all like a religious upbringing growing up, and how would you describe yourself religiously by the time you were a Twitch streamer?
Yeah, so no, I wasn't raised religious at all. In high school, I had always believed there was something out there, but in high school, I fell into the whole Wiccan scene. I really think a lot of it was socially constructed because all my friends were sort of doing that. So I fell into that, and through high school, I slowly started to develop animosity towards Christians because I sort of like believed the lie that Christians hate certain groups of people. And I didn't understand the context of what those things meant. So by the time I became a Twitch streamer, I was very anti-Christian. I wasn't Wiccan anymore, but you know, I again, being a product of that environment, you're sort of exposed to a lot of people who are not religious. So I kept feeding into it, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Wiccan is an interesting kind of, kind of culture to me. Again, I'm not that familiar with it, but, there's the side of it that's like, oh, I actually believe I'm practicing witchcraft and stuff like that. And then there's the aspect that you're kind of describing, which is it's kind of a cultural thing. It's like, oh, we want to have a certain way of identifying spiritually, but not being part of the establishment religion that we don't like.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong. I had attempted to do some spells and I thought that was doing something. But in retrospect, my logic wasn't there because I would say I don't believe in the Christian God, but I somehow have the ability to manifest things by doing various rituals. It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Was that like something that was like your friends were doing it and they kind of taught you, or was there anything like more structural?
Well, okay, so for more context, I was kind of like a loser in school, so I wasn't cool, and I found community with people who were Wiccan, and so it's not like they taught me, but I saw that these people are really nice, and I think I'm nice, so I just sort of picked up on it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so by the time you kind of are going into being a full-time Twitch streamer, which again, yeah, it's a very, I don't know, again, I'm gonna sound like really lame talking about this, but it's very, punk scene, very young and very cool and very, kind of independent-minded scene. You kind of you became part of that community of sort of Twitch streaming. And so how did that transition go from kind of, you're going, from sort of, your high school community and that community building there, sort of Wiccan, and you kind of left that and then you started going a part of the Twitch streaming community. What was that, how'd that transition happen, and what are kind of the differences between those two communities that you kind of were part of?
Yeah, well, I'll answer the last question. I don't think there's much of a difference because I have a friend that says high school never ended. It's just the different hallways. And there's so much truth to that because, especially with me when I became a content creator, early on, I figured out, okay, if I want views, I have to produce content that people like. So what is the most popular content? So I naturally go online and I start searching, okay, who are the most popular streamers? What are they like? What do they do? And without even me explicitly trying to be a carbon copy of these people, I started to pick up on a lot of their mannerisms, and I started to learn, okay, what are the things that get me views? What are the things that upset people? And so you over time start to, mold yourself into this person that really wasn't what I was in high school, maybe a more extreme variation of it. More specifically through Twitch, I started to become a social justice warrior because I thought, if I'm angry about this specific thing, people like me for that. They want to come in my chat and support me. And so when I say it's really no different from high school, it's we all in a way kind of like follow the crowd when we're not anchored to something that's constant. And that was definitely my case.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, I know, I agree. I mean, everybody wants love and acceptance, and everybody needs love and acceptance in a community. And in high school, you find like, okay, who are the people who I like and kind of want to be like, and I believe will love and accept me? And how do I conform either to their beliefs or their, what are their criteria is for that? And we're familiar with understanding it working that way in high school, but you're right, it really does work that way in any other community. So when you're like, okay, Wiccan is kind of the group, I can do that in high school. And then when you wanted to be a content creator on Twitch, you're saying, okay, what does that look like here in this community? And you describe yourself as a social justice warrior. Yeah. How would you define that social justice warrior at the time, that community that you were adopting in order to fit in that way?
Yeah. If I can summarize it, don't say anything that's going to hurt anyone's feelings. And so I'll give you a little bit of an example. I remember, and I think there's a clip of this saved somewhere in my archive of Twitch. A Christian actually came into my chat at one point, and I was doing a lot of makeup and just crazy stuff. And I remember the Christian came in and they said, this is kind of demonic. Like, they said this to my stream. This is kind of demonic. And I was so insulted, and I was just like, report this person. Like, I just couldn't fathom that someone would say something to hurt my feelings. And so, whether it's like the LGBT or feeding into the victim narrative of Black culture, there was sort of like, if you go against any of these things that could result in hurting these people's feelings, these marginalized peoples, then that's bad. And so being on the other side, I would say, okay, I'm a social justice warrior because I'm not going to hurt their feelings. I'm not going to say anything to upset them.
Gotcha. Okay. So you can correct me if I'm wrong how I'm saying this, but being a social justice warrior is protecting people who are marginalized, not just in kind of like concrete ways, but also psychologically.
Psychologically, yeah.
It's like, okay, there's these marginalized groups, whether it's the LGBTQ community, Black community, the plus size community, whatever it is. These are people who are oppressed by society, and I am on their side defending them, not just making sure they get access to healthcare or whatever, but I'm protecting them psychologically from the oppression of bigotry for that. So that would be what you're talking about.
I would say that's pretty accurate. And I mean, if you listen to a lot of like social justice, lingo, there's a big emphasis on mental health. And so especially on Twitch, everything is about mental health and positive vibes only. And even in my community, I said, don't come into my chat if you want to talk about religion or politics, because I knew that these conversations would lead to hurting someone's mental health.
Well, it's funny. I mean, it is funny because, again, I have my own podcast, The Overthinkers, and we love talking about like all sorts of topics, but even we have a rule on our page, our Facebook page, that we talk about everything except politics because people are just not capable of handling that in a mature way. So I definitely understand that. But yeah, okay, so but it's interesting because you had just talked about like also it's being outraged by something is a huge part of this. So you're not supposed to hurt people's feelings, but you are supposed to be outraged at people who are hurting other people in that way, and that's a part of that culture.
Right. Yeah. And the culture, it sort of creates this this dehumanizing aspect towards people who do the hurt feelings. And so hey, that's a racist, that's a homophobe, that's a this and that. So when you know that these people are attached to these labels, you don't see the humanity in them, so you can justify you being a jerk towards them,
Sure.
because they're the aggressor.
Yeah. Right. So you have a dividing line. Here's the protected groups. Here's the marginalized groups. These are the ones who need protecting, and we defend. And then and defend from everything, whether it's practical things or hurt feelings. And then you have these group of people over there who they're the ones we attack, and we don't care about their feelings or their anything practical, because they're the oppressors. Okay, that's the kind of culture you entered into. And then, kind of your story, kind of the inciting incident of your story kind of gets going because that sort of got turned on you. And the, cancel culture is a phrase that's thrown around a lot these days, but you experienced kind of one of the most kind of severe cases of, like, you could say, cancel culture that I've seen, where it really crossed the line to where people would describe it as cyberbullying.
Yeah.
But cyberbullying, people don't think about cyberbullying in the context of somebody who's a professional, like a professional being cyberbullied, because then employment gets involved in all of that sort of stuff. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Give people a brief idea. How did that happen? How did suddenly you become the target of the social justice warrior, as you described it, outrage and cancel culture?
Yeah, so I noticed it was a slow progression, because I had said various comments for a couple of months, and I guess people were sort of taking notes and just waiting for me to say the thing. And so, but the thing that really got people upset was when I questioned why everyone on Twitter was accusing people of being racist when they were questioning why Disney was casting a black actress to play Little Mermaid. I grew up watching Disney movies. I watched The Little Mermaid. I know Ariel is not black. So I'm wondering what's going on here. And everyone's just saying, oh, you're racist if you have a problem with this. It's like, no, I am nostalgic, and I think you should just leave movies alone. And people thought that was, specifically black leftists in the Twitch community, thought that was totally unacceptable. And as a black woman, there was sort of this unspoken expectation that I'm supposed to strive for the thing, whatever the thing is, in this case, representation for the black community. And obviously I wasn't. So I was seen as anti-black and, black white supremacist and all these things. And then after that, I voted for Trump, and that was like, oh, now they see me as dead now.
Yeah, no, so that's really interesting. Again, it does go back to, we're going to get back to this in a different way at the end, towards the end of this interview. But it is interesting. Again, it seems like most communities have like the thing that you can't do, if you want to be accepted, and the line you can't cross. And to some degree that's understandable. I mean, like every community is like, no, if you say this or do this, maybe you're not one of us anymore. But it does seem like that's a really low bar to be like, hey, I don't think that if you object to this, you're necessarily a racist. Right. Like, that seems like maybe something you can argue about, but that does seem like a low bar to which to say, okay, we're going to try to, cancel this person. Right. So how did that manifest? Like, what were they doing in terms of attempting to cancel you, so to speak? Yeah,
absolutely. And so, and you made the point too, because when people hear cyberbullying, they think just turn off the computer, and it's not that simple if you make a living on the internet. And that's why I get so concerned where a lot of people are trying to encourage others. Yeah, get a job online. It's like, I feel like that's just creating the perfect environment for cancel culture, because as these people were doing, they were reaching out to my sponsors. They were trying to get me canceled from a lot of my paid contracts. People were unsubscribing. They were, when people do boycotts, it's like, if it's one thing if you don't want to support a product or a company, it's another thing to formulate a campaign and tell everyone else to stop supporting you because they personally have a problem with the person that they're getting the product from. And that's what was happening. It was like this orchestrated campaign. And I would even I switched over to YouTube at one point, and they would follow me to YouTube. It's like, it doesn't matter where I go. You just want me to not exist on the internet ever again, is what it seemed like.
Yeah, no. So like we're watching the documentary, and again, people were just leaving hateful comments on whatever platform you were on all the time, whether it was on Twitter where they talked about it or on your Twitch, going into your chat and harassing you, following you, harassing you, and so and then and it is that weird perfect storm of your social life is online and people are just following you everywhere to make you miserable there.
Yeah.
And again, if somebody in real life just followed you wherever you went, you could get them arrested. It's like, okay, they're harassing me. Like but if somebody follows you wherever you go online and, tries to, destroy your mental health, you can't do that in the same way. There aren't those kind of, laws in place, mostly because everybody who's making the laws is, over 100 years old. But then, but then also, again, it's you said the boycott aspect that's connected with it. It's like, okay, we not only want to harass you, we want to go to your employers and make you not be able to make a living this way. And so that it's talked about in the documentary, that took a real toll on your mental health, obviously.
Yeah.
Speaking of mental health, this very concerned mental health community, to the degree that you were considering ending it for a while. So I without while being sensitive to what was that like to be in that dark place, and what made you stick it out?
Yeah, I mean, it was the worst. I mean, I had always sort of dealt with depression on and off, but that really was the worst in my entire life. And I think it was that bad because, well, first of all, I wasn't expecting it. A lot of the people who were doing this to me were people that I trusted, people that were a part of my community, who supported me, who would come up to me whenever I'd go to conventions. I love you, Gothix. And so it messed with my brain a lot. And also, I had put all of my purpose into content creation. I said, this is the reason for my existence, is being the top content creator. And I was putting everything into that field. And then when all this happened, I'm like, well, what do I do now? Do I go back to corporate America? Like, how do I recover from this? My friends don't even want to talk to me anymore. So yeah, that I would say that contributed to how terrible it was. And the reason that I stuck it out was I would say a little bit of I don't want to say pride, but at some point I said to myself, this is how I make money. I have to get back online. I have to make money. They don't like me. Who cares? I don't know what I'm doing right now. I'm just going to make this video and people might get upset with me, whatever. And there was a part of me that also said, I want to be the rising phoenix that like punches back, even though mentally I was not capable of doing anything at that moment. So it was a combination of responsibility and realizing you have to keep going.
That's really interesting. I mean, I did an interview with one of my Jewish friends who's kind of an agnostic Jew, and I kind of said, well, if you're not, religious, Jewish, like why do you, hold kind of so tightly to kind of your Jewish identity, and one of the things she said is that, and kind of why do people within kind of the Jewish community that do that? And she said, well, a lot of it is kind of just spite. Don't want the anti-Semites to win, and I found that to be a really entertaining, but like relatable answer.
Yeah, it's real.
Yeah, it's like, no, I can't have people who treated me this badly win.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. So but then you as you were doing this, it kind of and you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm describing this wrongly, but having survived, an attempt to cancel you, started to kind of go even more out there and say, okay, maybe I'll say other things that are offensive to people, and to go out and start talking more politically and saying things that are more controversial, particularly in the community that you had been a part of. How did that happen? What was the shift that made you start doing that?
Yeah. Well, I think it was at the point I was thinking to myself, well, what do I have to lose? a lot of people who were supporting me, who were paying my bills, see me as trash now. So it's not like I'm going to upset them anymore. They're already not supporting me, so I might as well double down. and so, if you even go back and look at some of my earlier YouTube videos, you can sort of see me starting to be a little bit more bold, trying to figure out, okay, where is the line? What am I able to say that, until someone gets really upset? And I found out that you can literally breathe and upset these people, so it doesn't matter. But it was really just, they're already not supporting me. I'm just going to say whatever I want to say, and if they don't like it, too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you once the COVID-19 pandemic happened, and then the Black Lives Matter protests and riots happened. Like that's when you started like really kind of blowing up in terms of like making really strong kind of political commentary.
Yeah.
What happened there, and did you find the result was of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the results was more followers. People loved my commentary, as you said. Truthfully, I don't like political commentary. I hate politics. I find it so boring. And I find that, early on, I was very, I wanted to go as far as I could with my opinions on the COVID and political realm, because I was angry. I don't like this idea of people telling me what I'm allowed to talk about. And that motivated me for a long time. Like, yeah, I'm going to say what I want. Too bad. And people like that. And yeah, I mean, that's really it. I was just angry.
No, I mean, I'm seeing that a lot, like a lot of, people who've been put into sort of lockstep with them having to have one political opinion, whether it's on the left or the right, having one political opinion, and then kind of step their foot out and say, actually, I disagree about this, and kind of get pilloried by their own side, and then start to and say, okay, well, now I'm just going to start saying everything and thinking everything. And there's a real market for that. There's a real, I don't want to put it that crassly, but there's, a market for people who are like, yeah, like I feel like, to give your examples, like I'm, a Black woman, and I also feel like I, shouldn't have to agree with everything that sort of the Democratic Party says, or,
right.
Or kind of on the other side, just like, I'm a white man, I shouldn't have to believe everything, I shouldn't have to be a fan of Jordan Peterson if I don't want to be, and so there's, there is that feeling of like, yeah, I want to just be a free thinker. I want the space for that. And the internet's kind of given a lot of people a place to do that. And again, so this is interesting. So you've gone through, you had your part of your high school kind of Wiccan community. I'm oversimplifying this, obviously, but then you kind of were part of the social justice, and you found then, okay, you kind of transitioned out of that to be part of the social justice, Twitch community, because that's the community you really more wanted to be a part of, that had a future that you were excited about being a part of. And then they kind of canceled you. And then you transitioned to another community, sort of the, free thinking, either dissident left or kind of like, online conservative political community, kind of the people who are like, yeah, I'm dissatisfied with modern sort of, whatever woke culture, whatever you want to put that label that as. You kind of, as you embraced by that community, and who were very excited, like, oh yeah, you're saying the things that we're excited to hear somebody say. So now, okay, well, there's a couple different ways to go. I'll go with this direction with this. How did that feel now that you're a part of that community and kind of getting validated in that way? And what was the difference, I guess, between this community that you're a part of and these other communities that you were a part of?
Yeah, well, I think I don't know what to call it. Free thinking, it's I'm politically homeless, but let's say there's a free thinking community, sure. or the red pill community. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Because I think the majority of people who at least started watching me when I started speaking out on YouTube were more of like the red pill. There were some leftists that would watch, but you could usually tell because they'd be yelling at me in the comment section. But it felt good to, as you said, like, inspire people. Hey, I felt this way and I didn't think I was allowed to think this. And, and you gave me a different perspective. You helped me come out of my shell and speak my mind. And it was really good to see that my suffering has aided in some way. But I also from the get was very cautious to get attached to these people because I saw how quickly people on the left can just switch on you. When I was on Twitch, they can just switch on you. So it's like, well, you guys, eventually I'm going to say something that you're not going to like. And I've always said this on my channel and I've always been right about it. So I mean, it was in terms of differences, though, I would say the community that I had found was a lot more open to discussion. There was a lot more consideration for what I was saying, as opposed to immediately writing me off as a bigot or some other label. People were at least attempting to think critically about the things that I was talking about, which was very uncommon from what I was used to.
Okay, so yes, you found essentially a community that at least one of the defining core parts of how they perceived their identity was discussion and debate about topics, which meant that maybe they would at a certain point cancel you, but it wouldn't be the first thing they would do because a core part of their identity was, well, we're going to argue about it first.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. So then, okay, transitioning back to the religious aspect of this, you talk about in the documentary how even though you've been part of this new community, you were still, your mental health was still struggling because you were still feeling, really depressed. And so how did this transition then to you had this kind of political, let's say, awakening, but then to a religious or faith awakening? How did that transition happen?
Yeah, well, this is where things get really interesting for my journey. As I mentioned, I found my red pill free thinking community, but I was still a little bit cautious because I'm like, okay, well, people have different perspectives, they're more reasonable, but I feel like they're going to cancel me at some point. And what I realized very early on is that even though the majority of my audience agrees with me politically or on cultural issues, that doesn't necessarily mean we are all fighting for the same thing. We might have like a general idea of what the goal looks like, but you can see very, very easily, like objectively, if you just look at these communities, you can see that everyone has a different idea about how to approach something. And some of the methods that people use aren't good. I think they're unbiblical, essentially. And so this was me before I had even become a Christian. I'm observing the fact that I have people on the right yelling at me because I think abortion is murder, and then people on the right are yelling at me for that, and I'm like, well, hold on a second, I thought we were on the same side. Well, obviously we have different moral perspectives on this, and I would just start to see more.
You all kind of
go ahead.
You all kind of don't like these people over here. You don't like these people over here, but what your positive vision for the future is different.
Yeah, and I think another common thing that I noticed was a lot of unforgiveness with the right, the red pill side. They wanted to feel justified in their bitter and their anger towards the other side of the aisle. And logically, I'm like, well, how is that going to work in terms of striving for unity? If you guys are both fighting with each other, that's not going to work. So it was me, faced with those comparisons. And then one day I was doing a live stream and I started to notice a lot of Christians coming into my chat, which was very interesting because I didn't think much of it, but I did notice it. I was like, wow, there's a lot of Christians following me. And then in one stream, this person chats and they're like, where do you get your standard for morality? And I'm like, it stumped me. And I was like, I don't know. And that's when I started to really get the wheels turning. Like, how do I know that I'm right about literally anything? And they don't know, like, how does this work? Yeah.
So then how did that lead to to actually, accepting Christ as you
Yeah.
did.
So so that was like, I would say the seed was planted with the Christian chatters. And then eventually the director of the Gothix documentary, Graham Wilson, he emailed me, and because the algorithm had just randomly worked that day, and he saw one of my videos on his timeline that says it's titled "White Privilege is a Crutch," and so he saw this thumbnail and he thought I was like a liberal and he was going to get scolded for being white. So he clicked on it just to hear my perspective, and then he was shocked at what was coming out of my mouth. This is what he tells me. And so he reaches out to me and he says, "Hey, I'm a filmmaker. I would like to do a documentary on you." Initially, I ignored his email because I'm like, this is weird, like just stranger danger. And eventually, I agreed for him to record a documentary on me. So he flew out to Rhode Island, and during that time, he shared the gospel with me. I was warming up to the idea of God and the Bible because of how depressed I had been, and my logic was like, what do I have to lose? I've got nothing going for me right now. There's no point. So I thank God for all of these, these situations that I went in, because otherwise I feel like I would have still been stuck in my own ways.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because, I've seen different things like this happen. Like, the big story recently is, like Russell Brand, who kind of first he started out kind of having like a political cultural awakening. And then he said, actually, Jesus Christ actually makes sense of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing a lot of that where people are seeing that now that, secular, there's a what you call it, a book called From Tolerance to Equality, where it talked about how all of the I'm gonna butcher this, but something like, but all of the editorials in the New York Times prior to the pass of gay marriage were kind of the most common word they used was tolerance, and then once gay marriage was passed, then all the most common word was equality. And kind of what they used for that is to say that was the moment where, say, like secular progressive kind of culture became ascendant. It was no longer the rebellion culture; it was the establishment culture.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be a lot of this thing of like, okay, now that sort of the secular world's culture is establishment, there's a lot of people who are saying kind of, okay, now I'm kind of like seeing that doesn't have all the answers, and now they first see there's something wrong with this. And then there's a lot of people saying, oh, maybe these people who've kind of been fighting against this culture all this time, maybe they have some of the answers that I've been missing. And it's really interesting kind of for me to see kind of your journey in that, of first seeing that the people that you thought had the answers didn't have the answers, and then going to and finding this answer in Jesus from people who are kind of introducing it to you.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me. And what would you say? So again, it's funny also, the person who made the documentary shared the gospel with you. I mean, that's just,
I know. I think about it, especially early on when I got saved. I'm looking back, I'm just like, wow, God was working in all these situations, and I had no idea.
So I said, now, couple things. So what have you found? Again, now we're getting into the communities. Now that you've become part of the Christian community, and that's a new community, what would you say is the biggest difference from the Christian community that you've entered from, the Wiccan, the social justice, the red pill community? What would you say are kind of the biggest difference that you found in the new community that you've joined?
Well, I think, I have a two-sided answer, because
I love two-sided answers.
Two-sided answers. Okay, so the Christian community as a whole could mean anything, because there's a lot of people who call themselves Christians. So definitely, I've gotten a lot of Christian followers for my YouTube channel, and for the most part, everyone is like I'm talking top tier, critical thinker, open to reason. They're relatable. They're not just yelling at me in the comment section. But then
But
but I've also discovered that there is, I guess, a sector of the Christian community who is very legalistic. And I'll get a lot of people, when are you going to grow your hair out? When are you going to remove your tattoos? When are you going to do this? Why are you acting like this? And it's eerily similar to the left in a way, where it's like they have become the God in a way, because if we were to sit there and open up the Bible and say, okay, where are you getting all of these, like these demands from? This idea that if I wear black, I'm somehow invoking demonic spirits onto my YouTube channel. Like, where's this coming from? It sounds like a cultural thing. And so that's the battle that I have now. It's in this new community. You have the best, and then you have some things that I'm like, it's a little bit weird. And so what I have learned to do is to fixate my eyes on Jesus, because because otherwise you're going to fall back into the trap of trying to please everyone, which is what I started doing. It's like I became a Christian and I'm like, oh, I got to please all of the Christians. And that's impossible. You're doing the same exact thing that you were doing when you were on the other side. I keep talking as if I'm a third person, but yeah, I was doing the same exact thing I was doing on the other side, is trying to please people, and you're never going to be able to do that.
That's really interesting. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is really fascinating to me, is one of the biggest differences you found now, besides, you said general, like most people you've met have been, able to have a conversation with. But the big difference you're describing is there's not just a horizontal relationship, there's a vertical relationship.
Yes.
Is that it's like, okay, I don't have to just kind of have a relationship with this community, and if they reject me, then I'm out of the community, and I have to please them. But primarily my relationship is with God in this community, and I'm a part of this community because I have a relationship with him. And as long as I'm not out of step of a relationship with him, then I don't lose this new identity that I have.
Right. Absolutely. I think with being a content creator, it's so easy, especially for Christians, to fall into that trap of trying to appease your community instead of God. God should come first and the community will follow, because everyone's going to have their own opinion about what it is that you should be doing, what it is you should be talking about. And if you were to sit there and listen to just your community and let them dictate your channel, you're never going to make videos.
So I guess that would be maybe my final question is what would your advice be to people, whether it's as specific as you, like they're a content creator on YouTube, let's say, let's say that they're a Christian, for a content creator on YouTube, and they're trying not to fall into what is termed audience capture, where they feel like, oh, I have to please my audience, or I'm letting my audience shape my values even. But how do you keep yourself centered while you still, again, people need community and that's all important. But how do you specifically make sure that you're keeping your relationship with God, so that, that vertical relationship that keeps you centered, keeping that central?
Yeah. So it's funny that you bring this up, because this is somewhat of a new thing for me, because for the last year or so on YouTube, I've been trying to figure this out. Like, how do I make content knowing that a bulk of my audience are primarily non-believing, and then I also have the Christian audience. Like, I'm in this really weird, space on the internet. How do I do this? And so the thing that I have learned is God has to come first above all things. Before I even turn on my computer, I have to open up the Bible, because otherwise I have my priorities messed up. Before I make a video, I have to get in prayer. I have to lean on God to understand what it is I'm supposed to be doing, as opposed to me just trying to figure it out, which is exactly what I was doing before. Just like, this might work, but the difference now is that I actually have someone to help me and to guide me, and I should lean on him instead of, just doing everything on my own. And the other aspect of it is, you know, as far as the cancellation goes, you're going to get canceled. I mean, people, you're on the internet, whether you're a Christian or not, you're going to say something that's going to rub people the wrong way. And so you have to be prepared for that. And this is why I also say, you know, for the people maybe who aren't Christians, you have to really be self-aware to know when you're following trends, because very easily you can fall into this habit of just copying the world just to appeal to your audience, which is what happened to me. I didn't think that I was overtly trying to copy people, but it just happened naturally with my desire to please my audience. And so, but if you're a Christian and you're always in the word and you're always in prayer and you're always, you know, prioritizing God, it's going to be more difficult for you to get swept up in the world. So that's what I would say. Get your priorities figured out.
No, that makes sense. I would agree. I would say, first of all, again, whatever you spend the most time on is going to form you the most.
Yes.
And so, you know, spending time, if you're a Christian, again, it's like spending time reading the Bible. I'd also say spending time, and I'll give this, you know, advice to everyone, spend time in real life communities, not just online communities. So again, you know, the research on mental health and virtues, like actual stable virtues of people who go to church more than 3 times a month, you know, and it's like we're really attending services, really being a part of community, is extremely, you know, robust. It's like, oh, it's, you know, people who call themselves Christian and don't go to church regularly, like more than 3 times a month, are some of the worst people statistically, and people who actually are part of the local community. So I would say, ironically, for anybody, you should be offline as much, if not more, than you are online. And if you're a Christian, you should have an offline life with God and the Christian community. That's as robust, if not more so, than what you have online. But that's what I found personally. But that's really cool. Anything else you'd like to say to the listeners at Religion Unplugged before we sign out?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of just added to it. It's staying offline. Don't let the internet consume you. That's a really big aspect of it. But I would say, you know, I agree with that. But otherwise, anything else I should say? I don't know. This was fun. I enjoyed chatting with you. I hope your audience enjoyed listening to me blab for a little bit. Go watch the documentary. I'm really bad with it. I'm so corny sometimes.
No, like it's good. Yes, go watch the documentary on loor.tv. It's a new faith-based Christian streaming service. Go get the 7-day free trial, if nothing else, just to watch the Gothix documentary. You'll be glad you did. It's a very dark, very modern Christian redemption story. Like, you know, so if you're interested in those, it really is very meaningful. So watch that. Where can people find you if they're interested in following you as a creator?
Yeah, you can follow me at Gothix TV on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter, and I have a website, gothix.tv.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so very much, Vanessa, for joining us today. Thank you, audience, for listening with us today. Thank you for listening to Religion Unplugged podcast for all your most important religious news and culture.